Welcome to the STR Data Lab.
Hello and welcome to the STR Data Lab. I'm Jamie Lane, Chief Economist at AirDNA, and I'm joined today by a first-time guest. I was actually surprised that I haven't had you on before, Seth.
I gotta come on more often. We gotta fix. I'm happy. You let me know.
We have Seth Borko, the head of research for Skift. Seth, welcome to the show.
Hey, glad to be here. Hopefully not the last time. Big fan of the show and your work, Jamie. So it's really exciting to be here and talking with you.
That's awesome. So, as a Skift subscriber, I love all the reports that you guys put out. And this one really caught my eye. And so reached out to talk to you about it. It is Skift's Outlook 2026 report. And what I loved about it is I always talk like on this podcast and looking at short-term rental data, hotel data. It's all like what happened. Like, here's where people stayed, here's how much they paid, here's the trends we're seeing in the data. And I get sort of no insight into the psyche of the consumer. Like, what are they wanting to pull back on? What are they wanting to spend more on? How do they think about hotels, short-term rentals, flights, loyalty? And it seems like you were able to really dig in and present a clear framework for how the traveler's feeling today and what they want to spend money on and what they don't want to spend money on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love this report. The Outlook is one of our favorites of the year. I think it's got a little bit of something for everything, and I agree. One of the things that's most fun about it is that it's a very forward-looking report. As an economist, you know that all forecasting is in some ways an exercise in futility, but it's about how you do it and what you're looking at and the data points that you're pulling in to get that directionality. And that's one of the things I really enjoy about this report is we look at trying to pull together all the different forward-looking data pieces that we can get. And it's never going to be perfect, but what can we piece together as far as a picture of where we're going as an industry, as an accommodation sector, as a short-term rental sector, and as a travel consumer? So those are the things that we try and do in this report, and it's always an exciting and a fun exercise.
Yeah, if I wanted to be right about my forecasts, I wouldn't have gone into economics.
Yeah,
That's
that's right.
definitely true.
Yeah. This is not the full discussion of this podcast, but I think it is an interesting thing that people do think that the point of a forecast is to be right. The point of a forecast is to think rigorously about scenarios for the future and what data we have and pull them together in a useful way. The point is not to be right. The point is to be informative, right?
Absolutely. And also that I update my forecast every month. So I it's always taking in a new set of assumptions on what's going to be happening in the economy. Things change every day. There's a new tweet that goes out every morning, and we react to it, and we come up with a new set of assumptions on what's going to happen in the world.
Yeah. And I like that you said there's a new tweet that comes up every day. One of the big themes of this outlook is that we went out and we conducted some, I think, really interesting consumer research. It was a global survey that we did across, basically three major markets in the US, in Europe, and in Asia, asking travelers, do they want to take more trips next year? Do they want to spend more in travel next year? What are they most excited to spend money on? The answer, by the way, is travel. We gave them choices. Do you want to spend more money on jewelry, on home improvement, on electronics, or on travel? This is such a key data point. This does drive a lot of our assumptions. Globally, the number one discretionary purchase in the world that people are most excited to spend money on is travel. That's so critical. And there's like a lot we can unpack there. Discretionary being the key word. People you need to pay your bills. STRs can help with that, but you need to pay your bills. You need to put gas in your car. You need to put food on your table. But when you got a little left over, what are you excited to spend on? Travel's number one, and it's true across the world. We've done this for 2 years running now, and it's the second year in a row. Overwhelmingly, people said travel. So on the one hand, we have the consumer who says, as long as I have that money to spend, I want to spend it on travel. On the other hand, we have A, will they have that money in their pocket? And B, are they confident they'll have that leftover money, which just comes back to, I kind of picked up on your point about tweets. or ex post now, which is that there's a huge cloud of uncertainty and geopolitics, which is really coming in, affecting both the economic and business landscape and affecting the consumer landscape. So we know that if people feel confident about the world, they will travel. There is obviously a big question mark, and like you said, we get a new X post every day that can potentially change our outlook.
Yeah, so and it's been a debate among economists of the sentiment data, of which the sentiment data has been really weak throughout the back half of 2025, and still to today, it's still very weak. And then you look at the GDP numbers, like that there's no weakness when you look at GDP. And you look at employment and it's still relatively weak, but you look at overall consumer spending, and it just is a total disconnect between what people say they feel about the economy and then what they're doing. So how do you feel about that? Like with the travel economy? Like, do you see a disconnect between what people say and then what they do?
Yes. I mean, I'm sure you must see it too. Anyone who's out there must see it too. Absolutely. One of the things that we still do to an extent is we used to ask people like how they feel about the economy or about their personal finances. And there are these great economists at the Federal Reserve and elsewhere who ask these sort of questions. And we sort of said like, let's leave those economic questions to the Fed economists, and let's ask people specifically, like, not so much forget about the economy, but let's ask people, how do you feel about travel? What do you want to spend money on? And really zoom in on that piece. And when you get people dreaming about their vacations and or I mean, people don't dream about business trips as much, but thinking about their business travel plans, which we do ask about, it's not only leisure. And so we try and really focus in on that. We also have something we call our Skift Travel Health Index, which is we talk about economic indicators. You've got lead in, lag in, and current. Like this is more of a current indicator, or even a little bit of a lag in indicator. But we do it monthly. We get performance data from a bunch of different data partners, and what that tells us, what the actual like, it's interesting. So like when we did our forecast, we sort of used a bunch of different approaches, and we said one, which you'll appreciate, Jamie, it despite all the Wall Street, anytime you ever bought an investment, someone's told you past performance is not indicative of future results. And yet we both also know that momentum is a powerful thing. And so we just said, like, how do we do last year? And our travel health index was up like 2% last year, which is like fine, muddle through. We saw RevPAR for hotels a little bit below that. What do your numbers say for STRs? Like it was probably in that same ballpark, right? It was like an okay year.
Yeah, up in the US about 5%, globally up about 10%. So, and it's still a growth industry, but not as strong as we would have hoped.
Yeah. So maybe not as strong as we would have hoped. STRs are coming from a different baseline than the rest of the sector. But overall, we saw like single digits. Then we asked consumers and we said, how much do you actually want to spend? How much more do you want to spend? And they said they want to spend 9% more. Like if I have $100, I will spend $109 on travel next year. So we actually saw really, really positive, in some cases, as positive or more positive than the economic data, sentiment data, when we ask consumers how much they want to spend. That 9% is more in line with the global STR data that you just shared. So it's an interesting thing. By the way, they also said they wanted to spend like 9% more last year, and that's not really it happened in STR space, but it's not really what happened in like airline world or hotel world. And so we actually see kind of almost the opposite, where consumer optimism for travel, it's like consumer optimism for travel outpaces the real data. The real data outpaces the broad sentiment. So I think people let the environment. There's that joke online about like monitoring the situation. Like these people like, oh, I got to go monitor the situation in Iran or in Venezuela. It's like people let monitoring the situation bring them down. And then they report, I think, this very negative broad sentiment about the state of things. When push comes to shove, they actually do spend more money than they think they will. And then when they really ask them to dream, travel is like they're dreaming big for travel. So I think we see these like different steps of sentiment versus economic reality. And ironically, the sentiment for travel can often be more positive than the economic data, even though the broad economic sentiment can be less because you think about how am I going to pay my bills, my rent, my gas. That's a negative sentiment. You think about how am I going to pay for my trip? Oh, I'll find a way. It's going to be great. I'm going to have such a good time. I'm going to spend time. I'm going to have family. I'm going to go to a beautiful Airbnb or short term rental, and I'm going to get a great place. And so we do see it. I mean, that's it's tricky. It's
Yeah.
tricky. What do you think? I mean, what are your thoughts on the sentiment piece? You're you're chief economist. What do you think?
Yeah. And in general, like you see the sentiment numbers vary by who's in office. And Republicans can be different than Democrats in terms of how they react to the opposite party being in power. And right now we see Republicans feeling pretty good. We see Democrats feeling really bad. When Biden was office, it was Democrats feeling really good and Republicans just feeling a little bit bad. So I do think some of that plays into it. I also think that inflation and inflation worries is a big aspect of sentiment. When inflation's going up and people just feel bad about like what's happening, and we're still in a relatively high inflationary environment. And it sort of leads into my next question around the K-shaped traveler. Like it's a theme we've been talking about. It's a theme across the entire economy, and it feels like it's a theme in your report as well, where the higher end travelers are doing well, the budget travelers aren't. But when we look at short term rentals, I try to think of short-term rentals as a sector and then travel and accommodations as a sector. Like short-term rentals is like the budget form of most people's travel. So like if you're staying in a nice full service resort hotel and you want to save money, like maybe we'll go rent a 5 bedroom house down the street this time instead of doing the all inclusive. So even a nice short-term rental can be the budget option for
Relative to an expensive short-term rental can still be budget relative to a really expensive all-inclusive resort.
right.
Absolutely.
And especially if you're looking to save money on other things. Like, all right, we're going to rent a home so we can do breakfast and lunch at the property. Maybe we're still going to eat dinner out, but it potentially feeds into someone thinking about the overall cost of the trip and where can they save money. And I want to get your opinion on that because some of those insights in the report were really enlightening for me of like where people were looking to save money, where they were reacting to the K-shaped economy and how they're actually spending their money.
Yeah, I mean, so the K-shaped economy is a huge part of this, right? Which is that, right, like the upper arm of the K is the luxury traveler that continues to go upwards. The lower arm of the K is the more lower budget middle class consumer that maybe is under more pressure. We asked a lot of people about affordability, and it comes up. Affordability is the number one concern. We see it in the political world. We see it in the travel world. We know it matters. We asked a couple of interesting questions. We asked, how are you adjusting your travel plans due to higher prices or inflation? The number one response that we got, so we gave respondents a bunch of different options, like, well, you'll hear from me in just a second. The number one response was choosing cheaper flights. So that's bad news for the airlines, not so much for the accommodation part. Say, well, the first thing I want to do is save money on my travel, on my flights, and we do know from our prior research that flights can be anywhere from like 40 to 60% of the total cost of a trip. So it's a really significant portion. The other big chunk of a trip expense is the accommodation. What's interesting is actually we actually didn't see too many people say they were going to reduce accommodation quality. I mean, maybe, again, technically train down from a luxury resort to a luxury Airbnb or luxury short-term rental might be a thing. The next thing we saw was choosing less expensive destinations. So and that probably ties into airfares because airfares are directly linked to length of trip as well. Obviously, we're not airline economists, but fuel is a big thing. Um, and so I think that plays really nicely into the short-term rental sector. If people are looking for less expensive destinations, that is another thing that I think often happens in the short-term rental space is you say, well, like I can do a big trip to Europe, or maybe I take a domestic trip. One great way to take a really nice domestic trip is there's a ton of these beautiful domestic within the US short-term rentals. I think of Smoky Mountains. I think of upstate New York. I think of on the West Coast some really beautiful, Tahoe kind of locations. There's some great markets that are just less expensive markets than an international destination. And then, yeah, we see people tell us also about like, you know, we also ask the opposite question. What are you going to splurge on? So, what are you going to save money on? Less expensive destinations, less expensive flights. We do not see people saying they're going to take fewer trips. That's the thing we don't see. We do not see people saying, I'm going to cut my travel. They say, I will find ways to save money to make my trip happen. And then the other side, we say, what do you want to splurge on? And say, okay, so well, you're going to book this trip. Where you really want to prioritize spending money? Accommodations is where they want to prioritize, and experiences is where they want to prioritize. So what we see is people are absolutely responding to the cost environment, absolutely responding to inflation, and they're saying we're making people choose. Okay, well, are you going to cut your trip? No. Okay, so you have to make some decisions within your trip, and we're seeing fewer flights, cheaper destinations, spending more on accommodations, spending more on experiences. I think that those 4 points do actually work very much in favor of the short term rental market. I think that there's probably a lot of short term rental entrepreneurs who are hearing that and saying, like, that's great news.
Yeah. Especially because and it feels like more and more like the experience, like, is part of the destination, and that's so true for a lot of short-term rentals where the hosts are, like, creating the destination in the home itself. Like, you've got a game room, you've got a pickleball court, you've got and all these things to do, so when someone's gonna take that trip and they are taking the trip to your property, they're not taking a trip to that city and then staying in your property, right? And it that felt like a theme throughout too, where experiences are really driving the trip, whether it's concerts and we've got FIFA coming up, but also like the things that you're going to do, whether you're going to go hiking, whether you're going to go and do any sorts of things. And and wanted to relate it a bit back to short-term rentals is and what did you learn in terms of the psyche of customers? Is it the ability to like find that experience or have that experience be new near your property? Is it that people are just looking for their accommodations provider to be that experience? Is it something else? Like, what did you see?
I mean, I think all of the above. I mean, experiences is this it is this all encompassing topic. I think that like what makes a good experience varies by customer, and it does matter. I think that it absolutely happens once a traveler touches down and checks into like a really unique, short-term rental absolutely qualifies. And by the way, unique doesn't necessarily mean I know that there was every we all went as a as a short-term rental industry, we all went through like a yurt phase, but it can also just mean, like you said, like a great game room, a hot tub, a jacuzzi, a chance for families to gather together. Those are powerful and unique experiences. We absolutely see what we see is that experiences come first, and so what happens is travelers used to say, "Well, I got to go to Paris." You know why? I don't know. I saw it in a movie. It's what you have to do. You got to go. Okay, what are you going to do in Paris? Well, I'm going to land in Paris, check into my hotel, maybe talk to the concierge. They're going to pull out a little map and draw me a little line, and it's going to include the Eiffel Tower and a couple of museums, and I'll figure it out. That's not what we're seeing so much happen now. I mean, that's obviously is classic, and that still happens. And if you, a listener, have not been to Paris and it's in your budget, I mean, you should go. But we're increasingly people seeing travelers picture the experience they want to have in their head first, see something on Instagram, on YouTube, on TV, talk to a friends. I want to go skiing on this mountain. I want to spend time with my family. I want to do this sort of a trip. I want to go see a concert. I want to go to a sporting event. Figure that out first, then back into, okay, well, where can I make that happen? And what kind of accommodation can I use to make that happen? And those become secondary plugins to back solve for how do I make this experience happen within this budget. And so that's what we see happening. And I think absolutely the accommodation, you think of I was actually just last weekend just stayed in a short term rental, and it was in I'm based in New York City. It was in the Poconos. It was wintry. We had a fireplace. It was a very particular experience that we wanted to have, and then figure out the accommodation and the location that would make that happen within our budget. So we're definitely seeing that coming first. Yeah, at the top of the funnel, and cultural immersion is another big part of it that we see. I'm kind of giving you a very long answer, but culture immersion continues to be a really important part of this. Live like a local sounds like a cliche. It is a cliche. You will not be living like a local, but people do want to kind of embrace that dream for a little bit. They also want to show respect to destinations. And again, it will depend on the destination and the market. If you're going to Orlando, you're probably going to Disney World, right? Or whatever. Like there's some trips that are not like I don't need to be immersed in live like a local Orlandian, but there are some trips where people do want that experience, and uh, we see people tell us that like less touristy destinations is important to them, or less crowded destinations is important to them, and we've seen this backlash all over the world. So we see all these things convergent in terms of what people want from their experiences. They want what feels like a unique, authentic experience. And if you're fighting a bunch of crowds at the Trevi Fountain, that maybe is not, maybe you have to do it once, but that's not really what people are seeking. Sorry to pick on the Trevi Fountain. Sorry to my Italian friends who've been watching the Olympics. It came to mind, Italy.
Wrong city, but yeah.
I know Rome. Yeah. Rome. But sorry to really double apologies to our Italian listeners. I was thinking of Italian tourism and I thought of Rome. Forgive me.
Yeah. So, and that all makes sense. Like, if I'm going to a market, like, you're gonna get entirely different experience if you're staying in a hotel in Midtown Manhattan versus staying in a brownstone in Brooklyn, right? And one is gonna be more the typical tourist experience, and the other is gonna be more, and maybe it's not living like a local, but it's getting the experience of living in the neighborhoods of those local markets. And for some of these neighborhoods around the world that are and sort of world famous of the look and the feel, and it is a different thing that someone's looking to realize.
And a great hosting experience makes that happen, right? In terms of these are the things that I love to do when I'm in this destination as a local. And here's how you can do those things. And also, go hit the sites. But then I really encourage you to, stroll through whatever, right? Like go stroll through this neighborhood or go shop in here or go do that. Like that hosts, you know, not all hosts are able to bridge that gap, but a lot more hosts are able to bridge that gap than hotels can.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, so another big theme in the report, and I really love that you guys dove so deep into it because it's all I feel like anyone's talking about today is AI in travel. We see it disrupting the major OTAs like Airbnb, Expedia, booking stocks were way down a few weeks ago. There's and this I feel like I hear it from hosts. They're like, "Oh, my direct booking website. Now the AIs are gonna find it, and I'm gonna get all these direct bookings because ChatGPT is gonna ignore the OTAs and push people direct." And then you've got in the major hotel chains being like, "I don't know, we're worried that we're not going to get direct bookings travel and funneled through the AI and chatbots." And like, if Hilton and Marriott can't do it, like I guarantee your website that you built on WordPress isn't going to be able to do it.
No, the website that you vibe coded. The website that you
Yeah.
vibe coded.
Right. So, and how are you thinking? I know you did a lot of research on the consumer side. Like, how are they planning trips? How are they booking? How is it changing how they plan their trips? And I definitely want to dive into that. But how are you generally feeling about how the trip booking planning process is going to change with AI today?
Yeah. So right now we see fast and rising adoption of AI tools for travel, search, and discovery. Some of the folks that I speak to in the startup world tell me that we're going to move beyond that very soon into actual agentic bookings. Let's take that with a grain of salt. They're talking their own book.
Yeah.
They run startups that do agentic booking and they think it's going to happen immediately. Will they be right? Will they be wrong? That's hard to tell. What we know for sure, it's a potential. I'm not trying to dismiss these people in public. They're smart founders, and there are people working on that problem that is coming. Exactly when, I don't know. What we know right now today is that AI is primarily used for search, discovery, and inspiration. People are using it. The use is increasingly widespread. In the US, I think we're approaching like 50% of travelers who are using it at some point in their search. In India and China, it's like we're above 80, above 75, 80. There is still a major trust gap. People still want to have control, but they're finding really successful use cases, again, especially for discovery. When we said, what did you use it for? Discovering activities or attractions, comparing flight options, finding inspiration or trip ideas, comparing accommodation options, researching destinations, budgeting, understanding visa requirements, all of this mental load that you have to carry at the start of a trip, they're using. Now, once they've got it all straight, they're often booking through more traditional channels. Again, some people think that will change, but that's a whole nother ball of wax. What this means for the travel industry, I think it's in some ways it means nothing. In some ways, it's incredibly profound. And in the sense that it means nothing is that the value will continue to accrue to great travel organizations, right? Like the rise of the internet did not destroy value for travel. It created value for travel. It made it easier to travel. And in that same token, I expect anything that makes travel more frictionless or easier will create value for travel. On the other hand, we would be kidding ourselves if we did not say that the shift from travel agents to Google search did not totally transform the economics of travel and business models and strategies. And similarly, we expect profound impacts here. I think one of the interesting things with the AI is how personalization becomes more important. How in a perfect world, an AI really like it can give one-to-one answers to questions that are a lot harder to find right now. And that has really some really big implications for who shows up in search, for where people search, for what people expect from travel providers. It's a big thing to untangle. I don't know what are your thoughts here, Jamie? I mean, give me some guidance here so I don't just go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, I agree, and it's so funny you say 50% are using it, because like, in my family, we're doing this trip to Iceland this summer, and I've used 100% AI, and my wife has used 0% AI,
Stats
and
don't lie. It works out perfectly. I'm glad to hear that.
and and she's using Reddit and mom blogs and it's all training off of the same stuff anyway. But it feels like, as you said, things are changing fast. I agree that the big companies, the established companies, will probably do fine. And I really liked your insight around that removing the friction to travel will probably lead to more travel. And overall, if you're growing the pie of travel, then everyone can benefit. Like whether it's the OTAs, whether it's and the brands and the direct bookings, whether it's the host trying to drive more direct bookings to their property, like it could more than likely be, I mean, everyone's gonna see growth in this age of, AI, and ultimately, like, now this is with my economist hat I'm coming back on, like, it's increasing everyone's productivity, and the more productivity you have, the faster the overall economy grows, and potentially the less time you need to spend towards working to get the same amount of output, and when we've seen that happen over the past 100 years, like, we all used to be working on the farms and not taking any vacation. Then we moved to the factories. Then Ford gave everyone the weekend off. Then and we all started traveling. Like, and this whole industry sort of popped up because of productivity gains around the economy, and that this ultimately could just be a huge tailwind to us spending more time on leisure type activities.
Now, I agree 100%. I think one of the interesting things, and I guess I'm circling back to what you just said, to what you said earlier about like how come these more mom and pop, smaller entrepreneur STRs are so excited about direct bookings, and how come the big brands are so afraid of being disintermediated? I think also speaks to what's happening because these kind of paradigm shifts are an opportunity to really reshuffle where value accrues in sort of the ecosystem. And I think one of the interesting things is we did the survey question and we said, if an AI gave you a great recommendation for an accommodation, cheaper, better, probably cheaper, would you switch from your preferred loyalty program? And the answer was there were some people who were like, absolutely no questions. There was like 6% of people who said never, but 94% of people were sort of like, yeah, make me an offer. And this is something I guess am I allowed to make a little bit of a plug? I mean, you've been on it. I have my own podcast with Sarah Kopit, the editor in chief of Skift, and she jokes that she just kind of randomly opened an American Airlines credit card at like a college sign up booth and has been a loyal customer of American Airlines ever since. And I think that there are a shockingly large number of those stories out there across the economy of people who, for whatever reason, settled into this one specific loyalty program and haven't thought too much about it in 30 years. And they don't even go to Expedia or Booking or Airbnb because they know where they're going to stay. They're going to stay with Hilton or Marriott or Hyatt. Once they start experimenting with new tools, that opens up sort of a little bit of daylight between the travelers and their loyalty programs to say, wait a second, actually, this is interesting. This AI recommended this great property, whether it's a short term rental or a hotel, this great property that maybe I wouldn't have considered because I'm just by default go to Marriott. And then, wait a second, like it can kind of start this chain reaction, which I think might be beneficial to non incumbents, let's call it. And I think that that's what the hotels are afraid of. That's what the short term rental people you speak to are excited about. That's what will that truly happen? You know, the empire does tend to strike back. I wouldn't be too you know existentially worried, but I do think it's real and it's happening.
So this isn't financial advice, but I don't see you're not necessarily shorting the OTAs right now?
Yeah, that's right. I'm not necessarily shorting them right now. I mean, again, well, it's a different conversation because also, yeah, it's a different conversation. There's a big difference. There can also be a difference between the growth multiple that the stock market assigns to a dollar of earnings versus the actual earnings power of a company. And so, whether we're in it's a different conversation for a different podcast. But yeah, I think that the OTAs have a lot of potential. Even the big hotel chains have a lot of potential. I will say that the world of personalization is coming to us fast. The world of and not in like a corny sense that we've been talking about personalization forever. The world of truly individualized recommendations is coming really quickly. Tie that into this conversation we've been having about experiences. Tie that into this conversation we've been having about people wanting to travel but being budget conscious. If you get a really great recommendation that really fits what you want to do at a really great price point, that is an incredibly powerful driver of bookings outside of loyalty plans, outside of traditional channels. What people want is they want a great, unique experiences that are custom to their preferences. Not everyone is going to want to hike to a glacier or go camping in Iceland. I don't know exactly what you're doing in Iceland. Not everyone's going to want to do XYZ, but there's a ton of really unique experiences in Iceland, and you want to find the ones that are right for your family, and you want to do it at a really good price point. And if some sort of tool can make those really powerful recommendations for you, that's huge.
Yeah. And especially if that's a company that you're loyal to and you want to build points with and that they can provide you additional value because if you're staying in that ecosystem.
Well, if it's within the loyalty program, all the better. I think loyalty is becoming more important. Again, customers want value out of their loyalty. This is a whole nother conversation. But like, think about this more price sensitive customer. They want to get value out of their loyalty programs. They want to earn points quickly. They want to spend them quickly. They want to have flexibility. They don't want to feel trapped in. That's why banks, for instance, we find that travelers find banks to be the most rewarding travel loyalty program these days because they can spend it anywhere, almost anywhere. They're not locked in, and it's just easier. So, cut. What is a value? How does a value conscious customer find value? I'm repeating myself. I'm using the word value a lot. I apologize.
Yeah, and it gets me to a question around talking about loyalty and Airbnb and even Vrbo and Expedia have tested different or Airbnb's talking about a loyalty program, Vrbo, Expedia have one, Booking has one. It feels like loyalty is tough in travel. And let's remove like the Delta and the Marriott and Hilton and talk about like the OTAs because there's so much chatter about Airbnb doing a loyalty program. And it's like these trips and you're taking one or two a year and the ability to build up loyalty when you're not doing it for business travel. Like Marriott, Hilton, like, oh yeah, I'd stay in all these hotels when I'm doing business trips. I build up a bunch of points and then I can spend them when I go and do a trip with my family. That's great. And then if I'm on my credit card and I'm spending money and I build up all these points, it's like, yeah, let me build up points when I'm just doing things I'm going to do anyway. Like, and have a slightly higher propensity to choose a Marriott over a Hilton if I'm a Bonvoy member, right?
Yeah.
So now you think about Airbnb launching a loyalty program, and Brian Chesky, their CEO, has said very clearly that he doesn't want to do an earn and burn type system of, and I suspect a lot of that is one, a lot of his customers are already loyal without needing to have a loyalty program. So why would you just like give them all this money out of your great profitable company to do more trips when you don't need to? And then two, like he thinks or he's talked a lot about that he wants to build an Amazon Prime style loyalty where people pay to be part of it and then they get these additional benefits. And I wouldn't consider myself an Amazon loyal customer, but I'm part of Amazon Prime and I use it all the freaking time. Uh,
I'm pretty Amazon loyal. I don't know if that's a controversial statement these days, but like I
yeah.
pay for Prime, and therefore, I mean, I can. This is a rant you don't need to hear. It's not super relevant, but like, go to a CVS, man, and stuff's locked up, and it takes forever, and it's such. All right, I'll see it in 24 hours on Amazon.
So given what you've learned in this report, like, and your sort of knowledge of the space, because I know you guys look at loyalty a lot, like, what do you expect Airbnb to do, or what do you think they should do?
So yeah, I don't know. I can say per se what I expect them to do. I
Yeah.
don't have that sort of. And if I knew that, I would. I could trade the stock. I wouldn't. No, just kidding. I wouldn't tell you. No. Look, I think your point is absolutely correct, which is that Airbnb has had this hugely loyal base. And I believe, I can't prove this, but I believe that their internal thinking has basically been our customers are loyal to us. Since they are loyal to us for free, we do not need to pay them to be loyal to us. I think that it's as simple as that. And it makes a lot of sense. I think the fact that they're considering it probably tells you something about the way that their business is going. Not necessarily that customers are becoming less loyal in the STR space, but that they want to take the value, the loyalty in STR, and bank that and transform it into hotels, into experiences, into services. So that's probably what is necessitating some of these conversations we hear that like Brian is getting closer to a loyalty program. I also think that there is some element of like you don't want to get left behind. Like, yes, I love Airbnb and the platform and I use it, but ultimately there is some of these. I mean, we maybe we'll get some hate mail from me saying this, but there is some a lot of STR product is increasingly becoming commodity product and it's cross listed across multiple platforms. So, whereas in the past, Airbnb could rely on its unique inventory, that's becoming less of an advantage today. So, I think that those are probably the two drivers. One, more commodity inventory within the short term rental space, and two, trying to leverage the existing STR loyalty and bring it into these new product lines that Chesky wants to grow. What exactly does that look like? I don't know, but I think it has to probably accomplish that second goal. It has to. Maybe it looks like stay in Airbnbs, get stay in enough, spend enough on Airbnb, and get he wants to do massages and he wants to do pedicures, and also maybe it's like get more of those services for free, or maybe even vice versa. Actually, probably you do even do vice versa. The reason why credit cards have so much stickiness is because you spend them every day. Brian has said, whether he will succeed, but Brian has always said that he wants Airbnb to be as much for locals as he wants it to be for travelers. So how can he tap into get locals to use Airbnb for local stuff and then reward them with Airbnb trips on their vacations? That starts to look a lot more like a credit card loyalty program, which is where we know the high value is. So those are some, I don't know, educated guesses, let's call it. I don't have I want to be very clear to our audience. I have no insider information or insights into what Airbnb is actually doing.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And it's definitely a big topic around today on what they might do. I do actually use their Hotel Tonight loyalty program where you book hotels, which like a lot of the chain hotels are on there, and then you earn like 10% of that for spending on short-term rentals on Airbnb, which is a pretty generous program when you look at it compared to, I mean, any of the hotel or other OTA programs.
I actually find myself using the Booking.com loyalty program, the Genius program, quite a bit just because it's so easy. And it's sort of like there's no points, there's no dollars. It's just like book X amount of stays in Y amount of time period and get Z discounts. Now, my Booking.com Genius discounts look an awful lot like the loyalty rates that a lot of big brands offer. So I'm not doing the exact math, but I do think that there is value again about friction, about reducing the friction. One of the biggest challenges in airline and hotel loyalty is the friction it requires to generate points and spend points. Actually, they've taken a lot of the friction out of spending points, but there is obviously a lot of friction still in generating points. There's so much less in credit cards because you just swipe and you don't even think about it and you're earning points. How can we create more loyalty with those sort of lower barriers to entry? I think that's an interesting question. You don't want to give away the golden goose, though. You don't want to make it too easy. That's the classic thing. I think that personalization and AI just continues to play a bigger and bigger role in this.
That it's probably gonna be that marrying of AI trip planning, the loyalty program that just in multi aspects of the trip, your stay, your experience, and once it's becomes it feels like one package, and once it feels easy, then you're like, "Yeah, of course I'm planning my trip on Airbnb because I get all these benefits from doing it."
And there is a service element to it. Like, we've been talking about these things almost like they're SaaS, like software as a service, and a lot of it is happening in this like asset light digital space. But there's a real execution element to it as well. If I try my damnedest to fly the same airline every single flight I take this year, which I do, by the way, and I don't get. I'll tell you, it's we can let you in a secret. This is not an airline podcast, but I fly United Airlines a lot, and I'm not. I travel a lot. I'm not a road warrior. I'm not a 1K super special premier status member. I'm just a regular old, whatever, gold, whatever, like second bottom tier. I still want them to recognize that. I still want to get some benefits for that. And I think that's true, like, especially in the hotel world. Like, and I think that's going to be actually, I think it's a bit of a challenge for the STR world because each operator is so individual, is that I still do want to get recognized. One of the tricks that hotel loyalty programs love to pull is like a free breakfast or a free XYZ. I think Airbnb would really struggle to do that because how do you coordinate a free breakfast across the thousands of individual? They don't have brand standards in the same way that a Marriott can just say free breakfast, or that an airline can just say free check bag. So there is a service element of it. So there's a lot going on there. But the expectations for personalization and service, this is the bigger AI point. The expectations for personalization and service are only going higher. If an AI can tell me, knows me, and can tell me exactly, I want this particular thing, and it says this destination, hotel, short term rental is great for this particular thing, you'd better deliver on that particular thing the way that I want it. You know what I mean? And I think that's one of the big oomphs is like personalization, technology, value, loyalty. It all comes back to this outlook of like consumers really want to spend on travel, and there's so much uncertainty consumers want to give you their money. They want to take a trip. They are just worried that something is going to blow up in the world, either figuratively or in some cases literally. And and they do not want that thing to blow up figuratively or literally in their whether they're on vacation in their destination. And so how can we just make it easier for customers to say, like, look, I know you want to spend money. Here is a great, personal, seamless, and value oriented offer that will just make it super easy, friction. That'll make it super easy for you to take this trip that I know you want to take and that I know you're nervous about taking. Like that to me is the key.
Yeah. Well, Seth, this has been a really insightful conversation around uh, and the report, the survey. For those that are listening that want to find it, you can go to Skift's website, State of Travel 2026. Seth, is there anything else you want to sort of leave the audience with? Where's best to find you? Any links you want to share?
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for listening. If you've made it this far, I apologize for talking so much, but thank you for listening. No, I lead our research team. If you have any travel research oriented questions, online travel, tech, consumer, short term rental, traditional accommodations, we'd love to hear about it. You can reach me. I'm sb@skift.com or research@skift.com. Our website is research.skift.com. And I host a weekly podcast with the editor in chief of Skift News, Sarah Kopit. So you can listen to the Skift Travel podcast, hear me there. You can check out our LinkedIn's. You can email us, or even better, go to our website and buy a subscription. That would help pay my salary and keep me employed. That would be ideal, but only if you can.
Awesome. Thanks, Seth, for joining. I'll see you around.
Thanks for having me.